In this video, I'm going to be talking about long-form content for architects, why you should be making it, and the three major categories, the pros and cons of each. So let's jump in with a bit of an overview. The first thing is that long-form content creates a point of difference from your architecture firm. We like to believe that we're sitting up in our ivory tower on our website and changing and tinkering with our little USP statement, and that's changing how the market sees us. The reality is that people are piecing together a string of different pieces of content that they've seen from you over time, and they're making up their mind about how smart you are, how passionate you are, how trustworthy you are, whether your ideas matter, whether you're a good architect. All of these things are being made up through the things that you're posting online, not what's written on your website primarily. So we want to be able to add to that message, change that message, and take control of that message by putting out content that's going to help to differentiate us. It also opens up the window and lets the light in to better understand what we're about, because it's not limited by the constraints of short form content, 100 words, a couple hashtags, and a few little bits and pieces on your website, which only give like a very surface level glimpse into how you think and what you know and what you are as an architect. The next thing is that it's the best way to find business opportunities. Day and night, your content searches the world for people and opportunities. And it's particularly important if you're venturing into a category or vertical that you don't have an established portfolio in. It's not that good to have 0 projects in the hospital category on your website. But if you start writing articles, what are the future of hospitals? What's changing in hospitals? Or you make videos, the top 10 hospitals and why they're the best. This kind of longer form content allows you to start to establish some authority and expertise in a domain that you don't have past experience in. So it's very, very, very good for that. And the final thing is it gives you stuff to share. Right now, you are a slave to your projects and your clients and your architectural photographer. If they're not busy, if they're not getting stuff done, you don't have anything to say on social media. So by creating your own content, you're able to change that, which I think is one of the really the biggest benefits of long form and making content in general from scratch. So let's get into the 3 categories and the pros and cons of each, starting with writing. Writing is good because it has a big SEO benefit. Google is a massive search engine, as you know, millions and millions of searches a day, probably per minute, and Google prefers to index writing. It generally indexes writing, and to be able to spread your wings on Google and to get more traffic from Google, you need to be writing. So a blog is a helpful way to do that. The next thing is that it's email friendly. It's the friendliest platform for email. It's pretty clumsy to deliver podcasts and video by email to your newsletter, but writing makes it easy to do that. It also improves your chances of collecting emails and being able to develop on email as a platform in general. Writing is also longer lasting, generally. It has a long shelf life. An article can be on your website, be getting traffic, be relevant to people for years and years and years. You may just update it, improve it over time, but in general, it's going to last a long time compared to the other mediums. So you get better bang for your buck. It's really good for putting together complex ideas in a way that video and audio can be quite challenging. They really put you on the spot, whereas writing gives you that time to think, that time to reflect and flesh out an argument as if you're writing an essay. It's able to give you a process that will allow you to digest some really big chunky ideas. And as a byproduct of that, it's, I think, the best platform for showcasing expertise. A small but still meaningful benefit of writing is that writing can be syndicated. If you write a really good piece on your industry, a really good piece on, unpaid internships, a really good piece on gender equity, or I'm just picking sort of topics du jour that the architecture media like to syndicate, those can be spread very easily if another publication or a much larger publication decides that they want to publish your article. It's happened for a number of my clients where they've gotten on some very, very big websites, and that has made a really meaningful difference to brand awareness around their firm. And the last benefit of writing is that it doesn't require any tools. It doesn't cost anything. You don't need to hire anybody. You don't need to buy anything. You just already have the tools at your disposal, and everybody knows how to write. You may not have much of a background in producing video or audio, but you do have an education that has made you a good enough writer, even if you don't think of yourself as a great writer. Everybody has the skills to write, and you can get better at it, but you've got those building blocks to start with. Now, the cons of writing are that it is painfully slow to make. I record a video like this in 10 to 15 minutes, and I hit stop and I upload. It takes me 10 to 15 minutes. It takes me multiple hours to write a blog post that may only take 5 or 6 minutes for somebody to read. So it is very, very slow to make. It is also hard to find topics that people are interested in. You really just have to experiment. You can do some amount of research, but you're largely just going to be, just putting your finger in the wind to see which way it's blowing. You're not going to know. Some of your articles will do well, some of them won't. It's a bit of a gamble, and it's hard to think of topics, and people get stuck a lot. So thinking of topics is difficult because it's hard. It's good to write about topics that are relevant to lots of people. Whereas with other kinds of things like video and audio, you're more likely to be talking about what's happening now because that content has a much shorter shelf life. So you're trying to write about the big things with writing, and that is hard to think about topics. It is also kind of difficult to share on social media. The feed algorithms on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they really do not want to prioritize links to articles. They prefer video, pictures, audio. So it's a little bit difficult to get that reach on social, but when it happens in a big way, particularly on LinkedIn. So kind of a con, but still a con. Now let's talk about video, the pros. It can be very, very, very fast to make and share if you are willing to accept a good enough production level. So it can be no cuts, no edits, no technology, like this video. This is me talking to a webcam in my office, uploading it, it's good to go. So it can be very, very fast to make because you have the tools at your disposal. You have a phone, you have a webcam. Work with what you've got and set creative limitations around the tools and the skills and the time that you have available, and think, if I can only do that within those constraints, what is the best, most useful thing that I can make? But that's going to be difficult for a lot of architects. We're perfectionists, and I'm going to move on to that in a bit. Video is by far the most engaging medium online. It is, strong visually, it's strong in terms of storytelling, and it spreads very virally on all of the major social media platforms. It does extremely well on social media. Every single platform is looking for video, and they want the longer the better. If you have your videos at 30 minutes, 40 minutes, they're going to love you for it. It means that they keep people on the platform for longer. Every single platform is moving towards long video, whether it's IGTV on Instagram or YouTube basically not showing a video that's shorter than 15 minutes because they don't get ad revenue. So it is promoted heavily on social. And finally, we're a visual profession. Generally, architecture is a visual profession. And being able to show that visual side of what we're doing is just showing another important aspect of what we do. The cons of video. If you are a perfectionist, it can be extremely hard and expensive to make and slow. You may apply your best efforts and everything at your disposal and only being able to put out a few videos a year because of the amount of work you've decided that a video has to have. So going back to that point, I don't think video should be that complicated. Respect the constraints that are there and set a goal to create the best content you can within those constraints rather than setting an artificially high benchmark based on nothing and then not making anything. Video, a con is that it does require tools. Now, these tools don't have to be expensive. It can be a couple of $100s for a webcam, or it could just be your phone, but it can require quite expensive tools, again, if you have those exceedingly high standards. Video is also not fantastic for SEO. You will not turn up that much on YouTube. It will be a little on Google, I should say. YouTube is a bit of a different story. YouTube SEO is a really big deal, and YouTube is the world's second largest search engine. People use it to find out about everything. So in one sense, it's good for that kind of SEO, but from a general Google internet searching, find me a Melbourne, Sydney architect SEO standpoint, it's not fantastic. Video also has a shorter shelf life than writing. It tends to be an inequality or bias towards your most recent content, and your older content can, unless it really catches on, it will generally get lost as the audience moves on to whatever is new and whatever is latest. So you shouldn't necessarily make video with the expectation that it's going to last forever. You need to be thinking about the short-term impact of your video and not what a video you made 4 years ago is going to do today. It's very situational, but in general, it has a shorter shelf life, so you need to be thinking a little bit more short-term about your video strategy. And finally, audio. Pros can be extremely fast to make, but I have to caveat that architects tend to figure out ways to slow things down and do things better than they need to be done. but it can be extremely fast to make. Slap a phone down on a table in a cafe with another architect or with your client or with somebody else, turn on voice recorder, and after 25 minutes of chat and sipping on your latte, you've got a podcast that you can upload to Apple Podcasts and you're good to go. It can be as simple as that. Some of the most successful podcasts out there are that. Not everything has to be NPR, 99% invisible, level production. It just should not be that way. You should try and aim within those constraints, but it can be extremely fast to make because the time to produce can be the time, the amount of time the content goes for, 25 minutes, can be how long it takes you to produce it. Major benefits of audio and podcasting is that unlike the other platforms, I think it's superior in that it really allows your personality and your passion to shine through. People are listening to your voice, they're listening to you speaking. It creates these kind of, I guess you could say, parasocial relationships where people feel as though they have a friendship with you, even though you don't know them. It is incredibly intimate. You're inside people's ears. There's something special about it. Ask anybody who just feels like their best mate is Joe Rogan. It is a real deal in that sense. So, and as a byproduct of that, it's where you develop your most loyal audience. You will develop an incredibly loyal and involved and deep audience from audio. It will be a smaller audience, but it will be a much more engaged audience. They'll be the kind of people who will actually email you and feel as though they're talking to a friend. It also has the deepest impact for extra long form. So if you're talking about, 40, 50, 60 minute, 2 hour podcast, that's very possible. And unlike video where people will drop off till the point where you've got 10% people watching through to the end, with podcasts, people generally sit in there for the whole thing. They're listening to it while they're in the car. They're listening to it on the tram. They're listening to it at the gym. And they're hanging in there and they're listening to it. So in terms of hours of content delivered per person, you're probably getting the best cut through with audio. Now, finally, the tools are inexpensive as well. A $150 microphone from JB Hi-Fi is all that you need. So, or your phone. Then the cons of audio. It's incredibly hard to promote. It's very, very, very hard to promote audio because it's terribly difficult to share audio on social media. It's difficult to share it almost everywhere. It's terrible to find via SEO. It's something that you really have to build slowly by cross-promoting it from your other platforms, going on Instagram, going on LinkedIn, going on your email list, putting it on your website, constantly reminding people that we have a podcast. Once you get them subscribed and once you get them hooked, they will be loyal and they will keep listening if you keep making content. But that initial promotion buildup is going to be incredibly slow going. So just anticipate that. So again, sound doesn't spread especially easily on social media. The best way to make sure that it does is wherever possible, set up a video camera to also record the filming of the podcast. So then the audio and the video can go really well on Instagram. They can go really well on LinkedIn and all those places. But it's just one of the downsides of audio. It doesn't spread easily. And the final downside of audio is that it usually requires multiple people unless you just ooze charisma and personality and can spin a yarn for 40 to 60 minutes and just ramble and do that flawlessly. Not many people can do that. Not many architects especially can do that. So generally speaking, you'll want to be speaking to somebody else, whether that's a regular co-host or whether that's a series of guests. You want somebody else involved. So it adds an overhead in terms of you having to schedule other people, think about other people, and collaborate. It's inherently collaborative as a medium, which can be its strength, particularly if you're the type of person who doesn't feel like you want the center of attention to be on yourself, which for architects is oftentimes an obstacle in terms of creating long-form content. But it is, I would say, considered a little bit of a con because it does involve variables in terms of you. It's harder for you to just sit down at your desk and make it when you have to have free time. You have to be organized about it. So those are kind of the pros and cons of each of the major platforms from my point of view. So how do you pick? Architects, what I usually recommend for architects is firstly think about of the three categories, what do you personally consume the most of? Are you a big podcast listener? Are you a big YouTube video watcher? Are you a big reading person who just reads the news all day and that's what you do? You just read. Whatever your personal kind of bias is, I would start by leaning that way because you'll understand the medium, you'll have some confidence going into it, and you'll have a general awareness what is the to be able to read the room of what people expect from that kind of content. So what do you understand best? And some element of where do you feel most comfortable? Where are your skills? Or where do you see yourself being able to develop skills in a certain area? That would be the other thing that I would look at. Now, personally, if it was me, if I was in this situation, and I am in this situation, and if I was running an architecture practice, I would approach it the same way. I would do all three. I would diversify and do some amount of each of them, but I would do them in a good enough / fast enough way that I could easily manage all three. Now, not every architect can do all three because of the typical things: time, resources, talent. I'm sure you're thinking, I couldn't have a podcast, make videos for Instagram and LinkedIn, and also write the occasional blog post and send it in an email. As much as I would love you to, you're probably thinking that's very unrealistic. But I think the reasons we think that's unrealistic, time, resources, talent, technology, are actually excuses. The real reason we don't do that as architects is because we have overwhelming perfectionist tendencies, where we think we set incredibly high standards for everything we do. They're unrealistically high standards, and we think we need to meet them. And if we think we can't meet them, then we shouldn't do it at all. But that's really not the right vibe for marketing and not the right vibe for social media. You should really aim for good enough and then look to gradually improve once you're going. You want to start just trying your best, doing what you can within your constraints, and then seek out small, minor ways to improve things over time. It's just about making gradual improvement. You might start making videos and they look terrible. Then you think, well, maybe I should just get a better camera at this point, or maybe I should add lighting at this point, or do what I should do. Or maybe I should spend a little bit extra time thinking about the topic, but do it as you're going and make those kind of changes, of course, once you're up in the air. Don't try to plan it out in this kind of perfect way and never do anything. Okay, so I would do all three because I think it's important that to create variety in what you do, different aspects and ideas that you have cannot be, really pigeonholed into one area. I believe certain topics or certain conversations belong in these platforms. And audiences have their own preferences and creating multiple ways to reach and engage and retain your audience is a way of providing value and ensuring that you're able to be top of mind with them over time. So look, I would do all three, but for most architects, I think a realistic goal to start off is to pick one and have a go. I sort of fantasize about what the industry would look like if every architecture practice committed to creating just a couple of pieces of content for each year. A couple of long articles, a couple of long videos, a couple of podcast episodes, because I think that would drastically improve the visibility of architecture online and really provide a massive boost to kind of what we do and how it's seen and understood by the general public. So that's my kind of call to action for the beginning of 2020. Set yourself a goal to make something that's long and creative and that you can share online. But look, that's it for this video. Let me know your thoughts. What content have you tried before? What would you make given the pros and cons that I've mentioned in this video? And I'll see you in the next video.